The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Choi Group's executive boardroom, each droplet a reminder that even nature could penetrate the fortress Taeyang had built around himself. At 32, Choi Taeyang possessed everything money could buy, a business empire worth trillions of won, penthouses in 3 countries, cars that cost more than most people's homes. Yet sitting alone in his leather chair, staring at the medical report that sentenced him to 6 months of life, he realized his fortune was as powerless as paper against the tumor growing in his brain. The irony wasn't lost on him. He who controlled the fate of thousands of employees, who could make or break companies with a single decision, couldn't control the one thing that mattered most, his own mortality. The metallic taste of fear filled his mouth, a sensation no amount of expensive wine could wash away. 30 floors below, Shin Ha-rin hurried through Seoul's unforgiving streets, her worn canvas bag bouncing against her hip as she rushed between her 3 jobs. The same rain that drummed against Taeyang's windows soaked through her second-hand cardigan, but she didn't have time to seek shelter. Bo-ra's medication wouldn't pay for itself, and the orphanage's heating bill was already overdue. At 22, Ha-rin had learned that survival meant moving faster than despair could catch up. She clutched the envelope containing this week's earnings from her night cleaning job at the Choi Group building. Every won was accounted for: rent, food, Bo-ra's heart medication, and if she was lucky, maybe enough left over for a warm meal that wasn't instant noodles. Ha-rin had never known the luxury of spending money on herself, but she had something Taeyang's billions couldn't buy: the unwavering belief that tomorrow would be better than today. Neither knew that fate was already weaving their stories together, that a chance encounter in an elevator would prove that sometimes the person who saves you isn't the one with power, but the one with nothing left to lose. In a world where money talks loudest, they were about to discover that love whispers softly and changes everything. Before we dive into Taeyang and Ha-rin's destined encounter in the heart of Seoul, I want to welcome you to our global K-drama community. The Hallyu Wave connects fans across continents, and I'd love to know how far our story travels today. Share your city and country in the comments below. Now, let's begin their impossible love story. The Choi Group Tower pierced Seoul's skyline like a steel needle, its glass facade reflecting the city's relentless ambition. On the 42nd floor, Taeyang's private office remained illuminated long past midnight, a beacon of his insomnia and the workaholic tendencies that had built his empire. Dr. Jung Min-ho found his best friend exactly where he expected, hunched over quarterly reports, trying to lose himself in numbers that no longer held meaning. The medical folder in Min-ho's hands felt heavier than it should have, weighted with the finality of its contents. "You haven't been answering my calls," Min-ho said, settling into the chair across from Taeyang's imposing mahogany desk. "I've been busy." Taeyang didn't look up from his laptop screen, though the spreadsheet had been displaying the same figures for the past hour. Busy avoiding reality. Min-ho placed the folder on the desk. "The latest scans are back." Taeyang's fingers stilled on the keyboard. In the reflection of his computer screen, he could see Min-ho's expression, the careful neutrality that doctors wore when delivering bad news to patients who weren't ready to hear it. "How long?" Taeyang's voice was steady, businesslike, as if he were negotiating a merger rather than discussing his death. "The tumor is growing faster than we anticipated. Maybe 6 months, maybe less." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, which Taeyang supposed was exactly what they were. He closed his laptop with deliberate precision and walked to the window, watching the city that never slept sprawl beneath him. "Surgery isn't an option?" "You know it isn't. The location makes it impossible without causing irreversible damage." Taeyang pressed his palm against the cool glass. Down in the streets, people hurried about their lives, chasing dreams and deadlines, completely unaware that one of the most powerful men in the country was counting down his final days. "Have you told your father?" "No." The answer came too quickly. "And you won't either." Minho stood gathering his medical bag. "Tae-yang, isolation isn't going to make this easier." "What would make it easier?" Tae-yang turned, his usual composed mask slipping to reveal raw vulnerability. "Watching my father plan my funeral? Having the board of directors pretend to mourn while they secretly celebrate the chance to divide my company? Tell me, Minho, what's the protocol for a dying man who has everything except the one thing he needs most? And what's that? Time." 40 floors below, Ha-rin pushed her cleaning cart through the marble lobby of the Choi Group building. The night shift paid better than her daytime delivery job, but it meant working when the rest of the world slept. She didn't mind the solitude. It gave her time to think, to plan, to dream of a future where Bora could go to university instead of worrying about her next heart surgery. The elevator that serviced the executive floors was strictly off limits to cleaning staff, but Ha-rin had noticed that someone, probably one of the high-level executives, had been leaving personal items behind. Medical documents mostly scattered across the floor as if thrown in anger or despair. She'd been collecting them for weeks, carefully storing them in a cardboard box, hoping to return them to their owner. The name on the papers was always the same: Choi Tae-yang. Even Ha-rin, who had little interest in business or celebrity gossip, knew that name. The CEO of the Choi Group was practically royalty in Seoul's corporate world. Tonight, she'd finally gathered the courage to return the documents. The security guard at the front desk had been surprisingly accommodating when she explained the situation, even providing her with the penthouse address. "He's probably still awake," the guard had said with a knowing look. "That man never sleeps." Now, standing in the elevator that carried her to heights she'd never imagined reaching, Ha-rin clutched the box of documents and tried to calm her racing heart. She'd practiced her speech a dozen times, but facing one of Korea's most powerful men felt like stepping into a different universe. The elevator doors opened to reveal a private lobby more luxurious than any hotel Ha-rin had ever seen. Her reflection in the polished marble floor looked small and out of place, like a sparrow that had accidentally flown into a palace. Tae-yang stared at the intercom screen, studying the young woman who stood nervously in his lobby. She looked nothing like the usual parade of business associates, socialites and gold diggers who found their way to his penthouse. Her clothes were simple, practical, the kind worn by people who worked with their hands. Her posture suggested someone accustomed to making herself small and visible. Yet there was something in her eyes, even through the grainy security camera, that caught his attention. A clarity, a sincerity that seemed foreign in his world of calculated interactions and hidden agendas. "Sir, I'm sorry to bother you." Her voice came through the intercom, melodious despite the static. "I'm Shin Ha-rin. I work for the building's night cleaning service. I found some important documents someone dropped in the elevator. I thought they might be yours." Tae-yang's hand froze over the intercom button. Documents? What documents could a cleaning woman have found that would bring her to his door at midnight? "Come up." When the elevator doors opened, Ha-rin stepped into his penthouse with the careful movements of someone afraid to disturb anything. Tae-yang watched from his position by the window as she took in the minimalist design, the expensive art, the view that cost him more per month than most people made in a year. "They're hospital documents," she said, approaching with the cardboard box held like an offering. "I saw the name and guessed they were yours. I know I shouldn't have looked, but..." Tae-yang's blood went cold as he opened the box. Inside were his medical files, test results, brain scans, all the evidence of his mortality that he'd thrown away in moments of rage and despair. How had this woman, this stranger, collected the pieces of his carefully hidden secret? You read them. It wasn't a question. Ha-Rin lowered her eyes but didn't attempt to lie. Yes, and I'm sorry. Her honesty was more surprising than her intrusion. In Taiyang's experience, people either lied to get what they wanted or told partial truths to manipulate outcomes. Pure, simple honesty was a currency he'd forgotten existed. Why do you care? He asked, studying her face for signs of ulterior motives. You don't even know me. Because everyone deserves someone who cares, she answered without hesitation. And because I know what it feels like to be alone. The words hit him with unexpected force. When was the last time someone had expressed genuine concern for his well-being? Not his money, not his influence, not what he could do for them. Just him, Choi Taiyang the person rather than Choi Taiyang the empire. Would you like some coffee? The invitation slipped out before he could stop it. Ha-Rin looked surprised. I don't want to impose. You're not imposing. He gestured toward the kitchen. Besides, it's the least I can do for someone who went to the trouble of returning my private information. As Ha-Rin followed him to the kitchen, Taiyang realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd made coffee for another person. His housekeeper handled such mundane tasks, and business meetings were catered affairs. But there was something soothing about the simple ritual of brewing coffee, especially with this quiet woman who seemed to fill his empty penthouse with a warmth he hadn't realized was missing. This is beautiful, Ha-Rin said, running her fingers along the marble countertop. Do you cook? I don't have time. Taiyang set 2 cups on the counter. What about you? When I can afford ingredients, she said with a self-conscious smile. I learned at the orphanage. We all had to take turns in the kitchen. You're an orphan. It wasn't a question. He'd glimpsed enough of her background and the way she moved, the careful economy of her gestures. Since I was 7, Ha-Rin accepted the coffee cup with both hands, a gesture of respect that touched him unexpectedly. My parents died in a car accident. I aged out of the system at 18, but I still go back to help with the younger kids. Why? She looked at him as if the question was strange. Because they need someone who understands what they're going through. Someone who can show them that being unwanted doesn't mean being worthless. Taiyang found himself studying her face, searching for signs of self-pity or manipulation. Instead, he saw a quiet strength that spoke of battles fought and won, of a person who had transformed pain into purpose. What do you do besides cleaning? He asked. I deliver food during the day, and I volunteer at the orphanage on weekends. She paused, then added with evident pride, I'm saving money for Bora's surgery. Bora? She's 18 now, but she's been like a little sister to me since she was 8. She has a heart condition that needs surgery, but the public health system. Ha-Rin trailed off, perhaps realizing she was sharing too much personal information with a stranger. Taiyang found himself genuinely curious about this woman's life, so different from his own rarefied existence. How much do you need? 50 million won. The number came out like a confession. I've saved 12 million so far. 50 million won. It was less than Taiyang spent on wine in a month, a rounding error in his quarterly budget. Yet for this woman, it represented years of sacrifice, countless hours of back-breaking work. I could, he began, but Ha-Rin was already shaking her head. Please don't offer to help, she said firmly. I appreciate the kindness, but I need to do this myself. Why? Because the things that matter most can't be bought, she said, meeting his eyes directly. They have to be earned. 3 weeks passed, and Ha-Rin began appearing at Taiyang's penthouse with the regularity of sunrise. Always with an excuse, documents she'd found, a misdelivered package, questions about building policies that the night security supervisor had supposedly asked her to clarify. Tae-yang saw through every pretense, but he found himself looking forward to her visits with an anticipation that surprised him. Tonight she arrived with groceries. "The security guard mentioned you never seem to eat," she said, unpacking ingredients from her worn canvas bag. "I thought I could make you something before my shift ends." Tae-yang watched from his position at the kitchen island as she moved with practiced efficiency around his rarely used kitchen. Her hands were small but capable, and she hummed softly as she worked, a tuneless melody that somehow made his sterile penthouse feel like a home. "You don't have to do this," he said. "I know." Harin glanced up from chopping vegetables. "But when was the last time you had a home-cooked meal?" He couldn't remember. Business lunches, catered dinners, expensive restaurant meals eaten alone while reviewing contracts. When had food become just fuel rather than nourishment? "Why are you doing this?" he asked, echoing the question that had haunted him for 3 weeks. "Really doing this?" Harin paused in her cooking, considering her answer. "My mother used to say that we're all connected by invisible threads. When you help someone, you strengthen those threads. When you ignore someone's pain, you cut them. And you think I'm in pain?" She turned to face him fully. "I think you're dying, and that's the loneliest thing in the world. I think your money protects you from everything except the thing that matters most: human connection." Her directness should have offended him. Instead, it felt like someone had finally spoken his truth aloud. "What if I told you the connection goes both ways?" he said quietly. "That your visits are the only thing I look forward to anymore?" Harin's hand stilled on the wooden spoon. "Then I'd say we're both lucky to have found each other." The soup she made was simple, vegetables and miso broth with handmade noodles, but it tasted like comfort itself. They ate in companionable silence, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows like fallen stars. "Tell me about Bo-ra," Tae-yang said as Harin cleared their bowls. Harin's face lit up with genuine affection. "She's brilliant, wants to be a doctor, but she hides it because she doesn't want to seem ungrateful for what she has. She draws these amazing anatomical sketches, the human heart, the nervous system. She understands her own condition better than most medical students. She sounds remarkable. She is. She's also stubborn and proud and won't let anyone help her." Harin smiled ruefully. "I wonder where she learned that." Tae-yang caught the gentle accusation. "From someone who works 3 jobs to save for surgery that I could pay for with pocket change? From someone who understands that dignity can't be purchased," Harin corrected, "even if pride kills her?" The question hung heavy between them. Harin turned from the sink, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Do you know what it's like to have people assume you're only worth what you can provide them? To never know if someone cares about you or just what you represent?" Tae-yang felt the words like a physical blow. It was exactly what his life had become, a parade of people who saw only his bank account, his influence, his usefulness to their own ambitions. "Yes," he admitted. "I do know." "Then you understand why accepting help from you would feel like confirming everything the world has already told me about my worth." Tae-yang stood and walked to where she was washing dishes, his movements careful and deliberate. "What if I told you that you're the first person in years who's seen me as more than a walking bank account? What if helping Bo-ra isn't about charity but about gratitude?" "Gratitude for what?" "For reminding me what it feels like to be human." Harin turned to face him, and for a moment they stood close enough that he could see the golden flecks in her brown eyes, could smell the faint scent of jasmine in her hair. "Tae-yang, let me help," he said softly. "Not because you need it, but because I need to do something good with the time I have left." Dr. Jong Minho found Tae-yang in his office at 6 in the morning, which wasn't unusual. What was unusual was that his friend actually looked rested, and there was an energy in his movements that had been missing for months. "You look different," Minho said, settling into his usual chair. "Different how?" "Alive." Minho studied his friend's face. "What's changed?" Taeyang turned from his position at the window, where he'd been watching the sunrise paint Seoul's skyline in shades of gold and pink. "I've been thinking about legacy." "Legacy?" "What I leave behind when I'm gone." Taeyang moved to his desk, pulling out a thick folder. "I want to establish a foundation. Medical care and education for orphans. I want it operational before—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. Minho opened the folder, scanning the detailed plans inside. The scope was ambitious. Scholarship programs, medical clinics, job training initiatives. It was the kind of comprehensive approach that could change thousands of lives. "This is incredible, Taeyang. But the timeline you've outlined, it would take years to implement properly. Then we start with the most urgent cases." Taeyang pulled out another document. 18-year-old girl with a congenital heart defect. Surgery scheduled for next month if funding becomes available. Minho recognized the calculated look in his friend's eyes. "This isn't just about philanthropy, is it? Her name is Bo-Ra. She wants to be a doctor, but her condition—" Taeyang trailed off, then met Minho's eyes directly. "She's important to someone who's become important to me." "Ah." Understanding dawned on Minho's face. "The cleaning woman. Her name is Ha-Rin, and she's not just—" Taeyang stopped himself, recognizing the defensive tone in his voice. "She's special, Minho. She sees the world differently." "How so?" "She believes in redemption, in second chances, in the possibility that people can be better than their circumstances suggest." Taeyang picked up a framed photo from his desk, a candid shot of Ha-Rin laughing at something Bo-Ra had said during one of their visits to the orphanage. "She makes me want to be worthy of that belief." Minho leaned back in his chair. "You're in love with her?" It wasn't a question. Taeyang had been avoiding that particular truth, but hearing it spoken aloud made denial impossible. "Yes," he said quietly. "And it's the worst possible timing. Or the best. Taeyang, you've been living like a ghost for the past year, just going through the motions. If this woman has brought you back to life, what's the point of coming back to life when you're about to die?" Minho stood, gathering his medical bag. "Maybe the point isn't how long you live, but how fully you live. And maybe," he paused at the door, "miracles don't always come in the form we expect." 2 hours later, Taeyang stood outside the orphanage where Ha-Rin volunteered, watching through the window as she helped a group of children with their homework. She moved among them with natural grace, offering encouragement here, explaining a difficult concept there, always with infinite patience. He'd come to tell her about the foundation, to explain that Bo-Ra's surgery was already approved and funded. But watching her in her element, surrounded by children who clearly adored her, he realized he was about to disrupt the careful balance of her world. "Are you planning to come in, or are you going to stand out there all morning?" Taeyang turned to find Bo-Ra approaching, her school uniform neat despite the early hour. Even without formal introduction, he recognized her immediately. The bright eyes Ha-Rin had described, the determined set of her shoulders that spoke of someone who refused to be defined by her limitations. "You must be Bo-Ra, and you must be the man who's been making Ha-Rin smile." She studied him with the directness of youth. "She talks about you constantly." "Does she?" "She's worried about you. Says you work too hard and don't take care of yourself." Bo-Ra's expression grew serious. "Are you really sick?" The question was asked with such simple concern that Taeyang found himself answering honestly. "Yes, I am. That's why you want to help with my surgery, isn't it?" Because you understand what it's like to have your body betray you. Her insight was startling. Among other reasons. What are the other reasons? Taeyang looked through the window again, watching Harin patiently help a young boy sound out words in a picture book. Because she loves you. And I'm learning that the things she loves are worth protecting. Bora followed his gaze. She saved my life, you know. Not just by working multiple jobs to pay for my medication, but by believing I was worth saving. Before Harin, I thought being unwanted meant being worthless. She taught me that sometimes the most valuable things are the ones nobody else recognizes. She taught me something similar. Then you understand why she won't accept your help easily. She spent her whole life proving she doesn't need anyone. But everyone needs someone, Taeyang said, echoing Harin's own words from their first meeting. Yes, Bora agreed. The trick is convincing her that needing someone doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Yoon Se-jin stood in Taeyang's office like a perfectly sculpted ice sculpture, her designer handbag placed precisely on his desk, her red lipstick a slash of controlled aggression against her pale skin. The folder she'd brought contained photographs, background checks, and financial records, a complete dossier on Shin Harin's life. An orphan, Se-jin said, her voice dripping with disdain as she flipped through the photos. Who works as a cleaning woman? Really, Taeyang, I expected better from you. Taeyang didn't look at the photos. He'd seen Harin's life firsthand, the cramped apartment she shared with 2 other women, the second-hand clothes she wore with unconscious dignity, the way she counted every one before spending it. Se-jin's investigator had reduced Harin's existence to a series of deficiencies, but they'd missed everything that mattered. What do you want, Se-jin? To save you from making a catastrophic mistake. Se-jin selected a particular photograph, Harin exiting a hospital after one of Bora's appointments, her face drawn with exhaustion and worry. Look at her, Taeyang. Really look. Do you see love in her eyes, or do you see calculation? I see someone who works 3 jobs to save for her friend's surgery. Her friend's 50 million won surgery. Se-jin's smile was sharp as a blade. How convenient that she befriended the one man in Seoul who could write that check without thinking twice. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Taeyang, you're vulnerable right now, facing your mortality, desperate for connection. You're the perfect target for someone like her. Se-jin leaned forward, her voice becoming almost gentle. I know you want to believe she cares about you, but look at the facts. A cleaning woman just happens to find your medical records, just happens to return them personally, just happens to need exactly the kind of help only you can provide. Each word was calculated to exploit his deepest insecurities, and Se-jin delivered them with surgical precision. Taeyang felt the familiar cold weight of suspicion settling in his chest, the same paranoia that had protected him in business for years. Even if you're right, he said quietly, what do you gain by telling me this? Se-jin's mask slipped slightly, revealing a flash of genuine vulnerability. I lose you completely. And despite what you think of me, that's not something I'm prepared to accept. Se-jin, our fathers arranged our engagement when we were children, but I've loved you since we were 15. Her voice carried a desperation that seemed foreign coming from someone so controlled. I know I made mistakes, chose my family's expectations over our relationship, but I thought I had time to fix things. Now you're dying, and instead of turning to me, to someone who understands your world, you're clinging to a fantasy. Taeyang looked at Se-jin and saw his past reflected back at him. The world of obligations and arrangements, of love measured in stock options and social connections. It was a world that had nearly suffocated him, but it was also familiar, safe in its predictability. What are you asking me to do? Test her, offer her money, enough to solve all her problems and see what she chooses. Sejin gathered her materials, preparing to leave. If she really loves you, she'll refuse. If I'm right, she shrugged elegantly. At least you'll know the truth before it's too late. That evening, Taeyang waited in his penthouse with the weight of Sejin's words pressing against his chest like a physical pain. When Ha-rin arrived, she found him sitting in darkness, city lights streaming through the windows but doing nothing to illuminate his mood. Taeyang? She set down her bag and moved toward him with concern. What's wrong? I've been thinking about your situation. Bo-ra's surgery, your multiple jobs, the financial stress you're under. His voice was carefully neutral, stripped of the warmth she'd grown accustomed to. We've talked about this. I want to offer you a solution, $1 million solution. Ha-rin went very still. What do you mean? I mean, I want to pay off all of Bo-ra's medical expenses, set up education funds for both of you, give you enough money to never worry about finances again. He watched her face carefully, searching for signs of the greed Sejin had insisted he would find. All you have to do is accept it. Taeyang, I told you, no conditions, no expectations, just money to solve your problems. He stood and walked to his safe, returning with a check already written. $1 million, enough to transform your life completely. Ha-rin stared at the check as if it were a venomous snake. Why are you doing this? Because I can. Because I want to help. The lie felt like acid on his tongue. No. Ha-rin backed away from the check, her eyes bright with hurt. This isn't about helping. This is about testing me, isn't it? Someone told you I was using you for your money and now you want proof. Her insight cut through his pretense like a scalpel. Ha-rin, who was it? That woman who came to see you yesterday? Your ex-fiancé? Ha-rin's voice was steady, but tears were streaming down her cheeks. She told you I was a gold digger and you believed her. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. Ha-rin picked up her bag, her movements sharp with pain. You think so little of me, of what we've shared, that you could imagine I've been pretending this entire time? I had to know. You had to know? Ha-rin turned to face him fully, and the devastation in her eyes made his chest ache. Taeyang, I've held your hand while you cried about dying. I've listened to your fears about being forgotten, about never having made a difference. I've shared meals with you, laughed with you, cared about you without expecting anything in return. And you think I've been acting? Sejin said. Sejin doesn't know me, but you do. Or at least I thought you did. Ha-rin wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. If you really believe I'm capable of that kind of deception, then maybe she's right about one thing. We are from worlds too far apart. She moved toward the elevator, each step deliberate and final. Ha-rin, wait. Keep your money, Taeyang. I'll find another way to save Bo-ra. I always have before. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped inside. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, but it won't be with me. Not anymore. The doors closed, leaving Taeyang alone with his doubts and the check that had cost him everything that mattered. If this drama has captured your heart with its raw emotional journey, you know that real love always faces its darkest hour before dawn. Stay with Taeyang and Ha-rin as they discover whether some bonds are strong enough to survive even the cruelest tests. For 2 weeks, Taeyang's penthouse felt like a mausoleum. He went through the motions of running his empire, signed contracts worth billions, made decisions that affected thousands of lives. But everything felt hollow, mechanical. The tumor hadn't grown significantly, but he felt himself dying by degrees, not from disease, but from the absence of the one person who had made living feel worthwhile. Minho found him on a Thursday evening, slumped in his desk chair, staring at security footage from the building's lobby, endless loops of people coming and going, none of them Ha-Rin. "You look terrible," Min-ho said without preamble. "I feel worse." Tae-yang rubbed his eyes, which were gritty from lack of sleep. "Any word from the Foundation's outreach team? About Bo-ra's surgery? It's scheduled for next week. The girl's condition has deteriorated. She needs the operation now, not in 6 months." Tae-yang's head snapped up. "Deteriorated how?" "Heart failure. She's been hiding it from Ha-Rin, not wanting to worry her, but she collapsed at school yesterday." Min-ho sat heavily in his chair. Ha-Rin finally accepted the Foundation's help when faced with losing her. How is she?" "Heartbroken." "About Bo-ra. About you. She asked specifically if you were involved in the Foundation's decision to help." "What did they tell her?" "The truth. That the Foundation operates independently, that decisions are made based on medical need and circumstances, not personal connections." Min-ho leaned forward. "But she's not stupid, Tae-young. She knows this is your doing." Tae-young stood and walked to the window, watching Seoul's evening traffic create rivers of light below. "She won't see me." "Can you blame her? You essentially accused her of being a prostitute with better marketing." The crude summation made Tae-yang wince. Sejin presented compelling evidence. Sejin presented paranoid delusions dressed up as research. Min-ho's voice was sharp with disapproval. "That woman has been manipulating you since you were teenagers, and you let her do it again when you should have trusted your own judgment." "My judgment has been compromised lately. By a brain tumor that affects motor function, not emotional intelligence. You know Ha-Rin's character. You've seen her in action, watched her sacrifice everything for people she loves. But the moment someone presented an alternative narrative, you chose suspicion over faith." Tae-yang pressed his forehead against the cool glass. "I've been burned before, by people who seem genuine." "When? Name one person who's ever done for you what Ha-Rin has done. One person who's asked for nothing, expected nothing, given everything without calculation." The silence stretched between them. "Answer enough. You're dying, Tae-young. Not just from the tumor, but from the isolation you've created. And the one person who could help you live again, really live, you drove away because you were afraid of being fooled." Min-ho gathered his things. "The irony is, the only person who's been fooling you is yourself." Meanwhile, in Seoul National University Hospital, Ha-Rin sat beside Bo-ra's bed, holding the younger woman's hand and trying not to show her terror. Bo-ra's lips had a bluish tinge that spoke of oxygen deprivation, and her breathing was labored despite the supplemental oxygen. "The surgery is tomorrow," Ha-Rin said, forcing optimism into her voice. "Dr. Kim says you're a perfect candidate for the procedure." "Ha-Rin." Bo-ra's voice was whisper-soft but firm. "We need to talk about the Foundation." Ha-Rin's stomach clenched. "What about it?" "You know it's his, don't you? The man you've been crying over for 2 weeks." There was no point in lying to someone who could read her so easily. "Yes." "Then why are you angry at him for helping me?" "Because," Ha-Rin struggled to articulate feelings that felt too large and complicated for words. "Because it changes everything. I spent weeks telling him I didn't want his charity, that I needed to handle things myself. Now I'm accepting exactly what I said I wouldn't accept. Because I'm dying." Bo-ra's bluntness was softened by the gentle pressure of her hand. "If I weren't, would you still refuse his help?" "That's not the point." "It's exactly the point. Ha-Rin, pride is a luxury I can't afford right now, and neither can you." Bo-ra shifted in her hospital bed, wincing with the effort. "He hurt you. I understand that. But he also saved my life, which means he saved yours too because you would have died with me." Tears spilled down Ha-Rin's cheeks. I don't know how to forgive him. He looked at me and saw a gold digger. After everything we shared. He looked at you and saw his worst fear reflected back. A man with that much money, that much power. Can you imagine how many people have tried to use him? How many times he's been betrayed by people who pretended to care? Bora squeezed Ha-Rin's hand weakly. I'm not saying he was right to doubt you, but I'm saying maybe you could try to understand why he did. I don't know if I can. Then don't do it for him. Do it for yourself. Because carrying this anger is killing you, and I need you to be whole when I get out of surgery tomorrow. That night, Ha-Rin walked through Seoul's streets without direction, her mind churning with Bora's words. She found herself outside the Choi Group building, staring up at the 42nd floor where she knew Tae-yang was probably still working. The night security guard recognized her and offered access to the executive elevator, but Ha-Rin shook her head. She wasn't ready for that conversation yet. Instead, she sat on a bench across the street and watched his office lights burn against the darkness. At 3 a.m., she saw his silhouette move across the windows, and her heart clenched with familiar longing. Whatever had happened between them, whatever doubts had poisoned his trust, she couldn't deny the truth. She was still in love with him. The question was whether love was enough to bridge the gap between their worlds. The cardiac surgery wing of Seoul National University Hospital hummed with quiet efficiency at dawn. Ha-Rin sat in the waiting area, surrounded by the institutional smell of disinfectant and floor wax, watching the sun rise through reinforced windows. She'd been there for 3 hours, unable to sleep, unable to think about anything except Bora's words about forgiveness and understanding. Ha-Rin? She turned to find Dr. Kim approaching, still in his surgical scrubs. The expression on his face was carefully neutral, the professional mask doctors wore when delivering news that could change lives forever. The surgery went well, he said, and Ha-Rin felt her knees nearly buckle with relief. Bora is stable, and the repair was successful. We'll need to monitor her closely for the next 48 hours, but I'm optimistic about her recovery. Ha-Rin pressed her hands to her face, finally allowing the tears she'd been holding back for days to fall. Can I see her? She's in recovery now, but she should be awake in an hour or two. Dr. Kim hesitated, then added, There's someone else who's been here all night waiting for news. The gentleman from the foundation. Tae-yang is here? He's been in the family waiting area since midnight. Didn't want to intrude, but wanted to be available if... Dr. Kim trailed off diplomatically. Ha-Rin's heart hammered against her ribs. The idea of Tae-yang sitting alone in a hospital waiting room, keeping vigil for Bora, for her, created a crack in the wall of hurt she'd built around herself. She found him exactly where Dr. Kim had indicated, slumped in an uncomfortable plastic chair, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled from hours of worry. His eyes were closed, but she could tell from his posture that he wasn't really sleeping. The surgery was successful, she said quietly. Tae-yang's eyes opened immediately, focusing on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. She's okay? Dr. Kim says the prognosis is excellent. Ha-Rin took the chair across from him, maintaining careful distance. Why are you here? Because I needed to know she would be all right. Because I couldn't live with myself if something happened to her and I wasn't. He ran his hands through his hair, leaving it sticking up in uncharacteristic disarray. Because I knew you would be here alone, and no one should face this kind of fear by themselves. The simple honesty of his answer disarmed her. Tae-yang, I need to tell you something. He leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. About my mother. The non sequitur confused her. Your mother? She died when I was 15, cancer. His voice was steady, but Ha-Rin could see the old pain flickering in his eyes. Before she died, She made me promise to marry Sejin. Our families had been friends for generations, and she thought Sejin would be good for me, would understand the pressures of our world. Harin waited, sensing there was more to the story. What my mother didn't know was that Sejin had been having an affair with my father's business rival, using information she learned from family dinners to help him undermine our company. I found out 6 months after the engagement was announced. The betrayal in his voice was raw, even after all these years. Harin began to understand the depth of his trust issues. I confronted Sejin and she cried, begged forgiveness, said she'd made a terrible mistake. She claimed she loved me, that the affair was just business, that she'd do anything to make things right. Taeyang looked up at Harin. I wanted to believe her, so I gave her another chance. What happened? 6 months later, I discovered she'd leaked details of our expansion plans to 3 different competitors. When I confronted her again, she finally told me the truth, that she'd been using our relationship to gather corporate intelligence since we were teenagers. His laugh was bitter. The woman my dying mother believed would be perfect for me had been betraying us both for years. Harin felt her anger begin to shift into something more complex. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. So when Sejin brought you information about me, I saw history repeating itself. Another woman getting close to me. Another person with financial motivations. Another situation where I was the fool who wanted to believe in something that seemed too good to be true. Taeyang met her eyes directly. I let fear make my decisions, instead of trusting what I knew about you. What did you know about me? That you worked 3 jobs to save money for someone else's surgery? That you returned personal documents instead of using them for blackmail? That you refused my help even when accepting it would have solved all your problems? His voice grew soft. That you made me want to be a better person, not because of what I could give you, but because of how you saw me. Harin felt tears prick her eyes. You hurt me, Taeyang, more than I thought anyone could hurt me. I know. And I know saying I'm sorry isn't enough to fix what I broke. He reached toward her, then stopped, his hand falling back to his lap. But I needed you to understand that my doubt wasn't about your character. It was about my fear of being vulnerable again. Before Harin could respond, a nurse appeared in the doorway. Ms. Shin, your friend is awake and asking for you. Bora looked impossibly young in her hospital bed, surrounded by monitors and IV lines, but her eyes were bright and alert. When she saw Harin, her face lit up with a smile that made all the sleepless nights worthwhile. How do you feel? Harin asked, taking Bora's hand carefully. Like I've been hit by a truck, but a truck that fixed my heart. Bora's gaze shifted to Taeyang, who had remained in the doorway. Are you planning to lurk there all day, or are you going to come say hello to your patient? Taeyang approached hesitantly. How are you, Bora? Alive, thanks to you. Though I have to say your bedside manner needs work. You look almost as bad as I feel. Despite everything, Harin found herself smiling at Bora's irreverent humor. Even post-surgery, the girl was irrepressible. Bora, Harin said gently, you should rest. I'll rest when you two figure out whatever's wrong between you. Bora's voice was weak but determined. Harin, this man saved my life. And Taeyang, this woman has been crying for 2 weeks because she misses you. So whatever happened, fix it. I refuse to owe my life to people who are too stubborn to admit they love each other. 3 days later, Harin found Taeyang in an unexpected place, the rooftop garden of Seoul National University Hospital. She'd been looking for him to discuss Bora's post-surgical care plan, and had finally thought to check the one place that seemed most unlike the corporate executive she knew. He was sitting on a stone bench, surrounded by autumn chrysanthemums, and the gentle sound of a small water fountain. In his hands was a sketchbook, and he was drawing with the focused concentration of someone discovering a long-lost passion. "I didn't know you drew," Harin said softly, not wanting to startle him. Tae-yang looked up, closing the sketchbook self-consciously. "I used to when I was younger, before I decided that art was impractical and business was the only thing that mattered." Harin gestured to the space beside him on the bench. "May I?" He nodded and she settled beside him, maintaining careful distance but close enough to feel the warmth of his presence. The garden was peaceful, insulated from the city's noise by walls of greenery and the soft music of wind chimes. "What were you drawing?" Tae-yang hesitated, then reopened the sketchbook. The page showed a detailed drawing of the hospital waiting room, empty chairs arranged in precise rows, a single window letting in streams of light, and in the corner, barely sketched but recognizable, a figure hunched with worry. "You," he said quietly. "The night of Bora's surgery. You look so small in that big waiting room carrying the weight of someone else's life on your shoulders." Harin studied the drawing, touched by the tenderness in every line. "It's beautiful and sad. I realized something that night watching you. You talk about being alone, about being unwanted, but you're surrounded by people who love you. Bora, the children at the orphanage, even the night security guard who lights up when he sees you." Tae-yang turned to face her. "I'm the one who's truly alone, Harin. Not because I don't have people around me, but because I've never trusted anyone enough to let them really know me. You let me know you. For a few weeks. Until fear made me retreat back into suspicion and isolation." He flipped to another page in the sketchbook, a drawing of Harin cooking in his kitchen, her face serene and focused. "I want to try again. Not just with you, but with the person I used to be before I decided that caring about people was too dangerous." Harin reached out and touched the edge of the sketchbook. "Bora said something to me before her surgery, about pride being a luxury she couldn't afford." She looked up at him. "I think forgiveness might be a luxury I can't afford either." "What do you mean?" "I mean I can't afford to hold on to anger when life is so fragile, so uncertain. I can't afford to waste time on grudges when the people I love." She stopped, the admission hanging between them like a bridge neither had dared to cross before. "When the people you love are more important than your pride," Tae-yang finished softly. "Yes." They sat in comfortable silence, watching autumn leaves drift down from the maple trees that bordered the garden. The afternoon light was golden, painting everything with the warm glow of possibility. "There's something else I need to tell you," Tae-yang said eventually. "About my condition." Harin's stomach tightened with familiar fear. "Has it gotten worse?" "No. Actually, it's gotten better. Not cured. I want to be clear about that. But the tumor has stabilized. Minho says there are rare cases where emotional well-being can influence physical healing in ways medical science doesn't fully understand." "That's wonderful news," Harin said, and meant it completely. "What does it mean for your prognosis?" "It means I might have years instead of months. It means I have time to do things right." He turned to face her fully. "It means I have time to prove to you that I can be worthy of your faith." Harin felt hope blooming in her chest like the chrysanthemums surrounding them. "And what would you do with that time?" "Learn to trust. Learn to be vulnerable without being afraid. Learn to build something that matters more than money." Tae-yang reached for her hand tentatively, and when she didn't pull away, he interlaced their fingers. "Learn to love someone the way they deserve to be loved, completely and without reservation." "That sounds like a good plan," Harin said, squeezing his hand gently. "But I have one condition. Anything. We take things slowly, real trust. The kind that survives difficult moments, that has to be built, not just declared. She smiled at him, and he felt his heart skip with hope. And you have to show me more of your drawings. Tae Yang laughed, a sound lighter than any he'd made in months. Deal. Though you should know, I've been drawing you a lot lately. Some might call it stalking through art. I call it romantic, Ha-rin said, and leaned against his shoulder as they watched the sun set over Seoul's skyline. For the first time in either of their lives, the future felt full of possibility rather than fear. 2 months later, the Choi Foundation's new headquarters buzzed with purposeful energy. Located in a renovated building in Mapo-gu, far from the corporate towers of Gangnam, it felt more like a community center than a traditional nonprofit office. Ha-rin moved through the space with natural authority, coordinating between the medical clinic on the first floor, the job training programs on the second, and the educational support services on the third. Tae Yang watched from the doorway of what had once been his corner office, now converted into a collaborative workspace where Ha-rin met with families seeking assistance. She was different here, confident in a way that had nothing to do with wealth or status and everything to do with purpose. She's remarkable, said Chairman Choi Hyun-woo, joining his son at the observation point. The elder Choi had aged visibly in recent months, the lines around his eyes deepening, but there was a softness in his expression that hadn't been there before. Yes, she is, Tae Yang agreed. Are you having second thoughts about stepping down from the company board? On the contrary, watching you these past months, seeing what you've built here, I realize I spent decades focused on the wrong kind of legacy. Hyun-woo clasped his son's shoulder. I'm proud of you, Tae Yang. Not for the money you've made, but for the man you've become. It was perhaps the first time in Tae Yang's adult life that his father had expressed unconditional pride, and the words created a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with achievement or success. Ha-rin changed everything, Tae Yang said simply. No, she didn't change you. She helped you remember who you were before you let fear make your decisions. Hyun-woo smiled at his son. There's a difference. Across the room, Ha-rin finished her meeting with a young mother seeking educational support for her daughter. As the woman left with a folder full of resources and an expression of cautious hope, Ha-rin's eyes found Tae Yang's, and her smile was radiant. How did it go? He asked, approaching her desk. Successful, I think. Her daughter wants to be an engineer, but the family couldn't afford prep courses for the university entrance exams. We can provide tutoring, books, and a small stipend for living expenses while she studies. Ha-rin organized her notes with practiced efficiency. Sometimes all people need is someone to believe in their dreams. Speaking of dreams, Tae Yang said, producing a manila envelope from his jacket. I have something for you. Inside the envelope were architectural plans for a new facility, larger than their current building, designed specifically for the Foundation's expanding programs. Ha-rin studied the detailed drawings, recognizing the thoughtful integration of medical facilities, classrooms, and community spaces. This is incredible, but Tae Yang, the cost, is less important than the need. He pointed to a specific section of the plans. Look at this. A residential facility for older teens aging out of the system. A place where they can live independently while receiving job training and educational support. Ha-rin's eyes filled with tears as she understood the implications. You're creating the thing I always wished existed when I was 18. We're creating it, Tae Yang corrected. This is our vision, built on your understanding of what people actually need. Before Ha-rin could respond, Bora burst through the office door with the energy of someone whose heart was working perfectly for the first time in years. You two need to see this, she announced, brandishing a thick envelope with the Seoul National University seal. What is it? Ha-rin asked, though she was already smiling at Bora's obvious excitement. My acceptance letter to the pre-medical program. Full scholarship plus a stipend for living expenses. Bora's grin was incandescent. I'm going to be a doctor, Harin. A real doctor. Harin stood and embraced the younger woman tightly, both of them crying now. Watching them, Taeyang felt a profound sense of completion, as if all the pieces of his life had finally arranged themselves into something meaningful. There's more, Bora said when they'd composed themselves. I want to specialize in pediatric cardiology. And when I'm finished with my training, I want to come back here, to work for the foundation, to help other kids like me. The foundation will be here waiting, Taeyang promised. Growing and expanding, ready for Dr. Bora to join the team. That evening, Taeyang and Harin walked along the Cheongyecheon stream, the restored waterway that flowed through the heart of Seoul. The path was lined with lights that reflected off the water like fallen stars, creating a corridor of gentle illumination through the urban landscape. Do you remember what you said to me the first night we met? Taeyang asked, their hands linked as they strolled past couples and families enjoying the mild autumn evening. That everyone deserves someone who cares, Harin replied without hesitation. You've proven that to hundreds of people now. Families who thought they had no options, young people who believed their dreams were impossible. You've shown them all that someone cares about their future. Harin squeezed his hand. We've shown them. This foundation, everything we've built, it's not just my vision, Taeyang, it's ours. They paused at a small bridge, watching the water flow beneath them toward the Han River and eventually to the sea. The metaphor wasn't lost on either of them. How individual streams joined to create something larger, more powerful than any single current could achieve alone. I have something for you too, Harin said, producing a small wrapped package from her purse. Inside was a leather-bound sketchbook, its cover embossed with Taeyang's initials. When he opened it, he found that the first page contained a drawing, his own work, but professionally matted and mounted. It was the sketch he'd made of Harin in his kitchen that first night, cooking soup with focused concentration. You kept this? He asked, his voice thick with emotion. I found it in your trash can the next morning when I was cleaning. I couldn't bear to throw it away. It was too beautiful, too full of... She paused, searching for the right word. Love. Taeyang finished softly. It was full of love, even though I was too afraid to recognize it at the time. The sketchbook is for all the beautiful things you're going to create going forward. Art that comes from joy instead of loneliness. Drawings that celebrate life instead of mourning it. Taeyang pulled her into his arms, and they kissed beneath the bridge with water flowing below them and stars emerging above. It was a kiss that tasted of forgiveness and possibility, of second chances and new beginnings. The Choi Foundation's art therapy program launched on a crisp November morning with Taeyang nervously arranging supplies in what had once been a conference room. Easels stood in a circle, each station equipped with watercolors, charcoal, and pristine white paper. Sunlight streamed through large windows, casting everything in warm, encouraging light. You don't have to do this, Harin said gently, finding him adjusting the same paintbrush holder for the third time. We could hire a professional art therapist. I want to do this. Taeyang straightened, his hands finally still. These kids have been through trauma, abandonment, feelings of worthlessness. Art helped me process my fear of dying. Maybe it can help them process their fear of living. The first group consisted of 6 teenagers from various orphanages across Seoul, each carrying their own invisible wounds. They entered the room with the guarded expressions of young people who had learned not to trust adult promises, their body language screaming skepticism. I'm Taeyang, he said simply, avoiding any mention of his corporate title or wealth. I draw because it helps me understand feelings I can't put into words. Today we're going to explore what that might look like for each of you. Min Jun, a 15-year-old whose parents had died in a factory fire, raised his hand tentatively. What if we're not good at art? Then you're perfect for this class, Tae-yang replied with a smile. This isn't about being good. It's about being honest. For the first hour they worked in silence, each teenager tentatively experimenting with different mediums. Tae-yang moved among them quietly, offering gentle encouragement but mostly just being present, a calm, non-judgmental adult presence in their world of uncertainty. Slowly, the room began to transform. Color bloomed on paper as the young artists lost themselves in creation. Yoon-soo, a 17-year-old girl who rarely spoke, painted swirling storms that gradually gave way to patches of clear sky. Jae-won drew mechanical objects, cars, buildings, machines with obsessive precision, his way of imposing order on a chaotic world. What do you see when you look at this? Asked So-young, a 14-year-old whose drawing seemed to depict a small figure standing before an enormous door. Tae-yang studied the image carefully. I see someone who feels small in a big world, but who's still brave enough to keep standing there. What do you see? I see someone who doesn't know if she should knock or run away, So-young admitted quietly. Both are valid choices, Tae-yang said. Sometimes the bravest thing is knowing you have options. By the session's end, the room buzzed with quiet conversation as the teenagers compared their work and shared tentative interpretations. For many, it was the first time they'd been encouraged to express their inner experiences without judgment or correction. Same time next week? Tae-yang asked as they prepared to leave. The chorus of agreement was unanimous, and several of the teens lingered to examine each other's artwork more closely. As they finally filed out, chattering among themselves, Ha-rin appeared with 2 cups of coffee and an expression of profound pride. How do you feel? She asked, settling beside him as they surveyed the room full of easels and the evidence of creative breakthrough. Like I finally understand what my money is for, Tae-yang replied. Not to buy things, but to create opportunities. Not to impress people, but to empower them. You were incredible with them. Patient, encouraging. You have a gift for this. Tae-yang picked up So-young's drawing of the small figure before the enormous door. I think about that girl standing there, unsure whether to knock or run. 6 months ago, that was me. Standing at the threshold of real life, too afraid to step through. What changed your mind? You knocked for me, he said simply. When you came to my door that first night, you weren't just returning documents. You were showing me that someone cared enough to try. Ha-rin leaned against his shoulder and they sat in comfortable silence, surrounded by the creative energy that lingered in the room like invisible warmth. I have news, she said eventually. The city council approved our application for the new facility. Construction can begin in the spring. That's wonderful. How are you feeling about the expansion? Excited, terrified, hopeful? Ha-rin laughed at her own contradictions. Mostly grateful. A year ago, I was cleaning offices at night and delivering food during the day, just trying to survive until the next month. Now I'm running a foundation that will help thousands of people. Sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life. You're living the life you always deserved, Tae-yang corrected gently. The universe just took a while to catch up with your worth. Outside, Seoul's evening lights were beginning to twinkle against the growing darkness. The city that had once felt cold and indifferent now seemed full of possibility. Each light representing a life that could be touched, improved, given new hope. Tae-yang, Ha-rin said softly. There's something I need to tell you. The serious tone in her voice made him turn to face her fully. What is it? I love you. The words came out in a rush, as if she'd been holding them back for so long that they couldn't be contained any longer. Not because you saved Bo-Ra, not because of the foundation, not because of anything you've done or given. I love you because of who you are when you think no one is watching. Kind, thoughtful, creative, vulnerable. I love the way you see beauty in broken things and believe in the possibility of healing. Taeyang felt his heart expand in his chest as if it were finally large enough to contain all the emotion he'd been carrying. Ha-Rin, I know it's complicated. I know we come from different worlds, that people will say I'm after your money or you're having a midlife crisis. But I don't care what they say anymore. Life is too short and too precious to waste time worrying about other people's opinions. Taeyang cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the soft curves of her cheekbones. I love you too. More than I ever thought possible, in ways I didn't know existed. You saved my life, Ha-Rin. Not from the tumor, but from the emptiness. You taught me that the most valuable things can't be bought or sold, only given freely. When they kissed this time, it was with the weight of commitment behind it, the promise of a future built on mutual understanding and shared purpose. Around them, the art supplies waited for next week's session, ready to help more young hearts learn the transformative power of creative expression. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon when Seoul was blanketed in the first snow of winter, Yoon Se-jin walked into the Choi Foundation's headquarters like a general surveying conquered territory. Her designer coat was immaculate despite the weather. Her heels clicked authoritatively against the polished floor, and her expression carried the familiar mixture of confidence and calculation that had once made Taeyang's pulse quicken with anxiety. Ha-Rin was in the middle of reviewing applications for the Foundation's new scholarship program when Se-jin appeared in her office doorway, uninvited and unannounced. So this is where the great Choi Taeyang is hiding these days, Se-jin said, her gaze taking in the modest furnishings, the walls covered with children's artwork, the general atmosphere of purposeful warmth that characterized the Foundation's offices. Se-jin? Ha-Rin stood, her posture automatically defensive. Taeyang isn't here. He's teaching an art therapy session. Art therapy? Se-jin's laugh was sharp as broken glass. How perfectly charitable of him. Though I suppose everyone needs hobbies during their rehabilitation. Rehabilitation? From his brush with mortality. These near-death experiences often cause people to make dramatic life changes, temporary ones usually until reality sets in. Se-jin settled into the chair across from Ha-Rin's desk without invitation. May I speak frankly? Ha-Rin remained standing, her hands folded carefully in front of her. I have a feeling you will regardless of my preference. I underestimated you, Se-jin admitted, her tone carrying grudging respect. When I first investigated your background, I saw a struggling orphan with obvious financial motivations. I expected you to take his money and disappear, or at least reveal your true mercenary nature eventually. But you've done something far more clever. You've created a situation where Taeyang's resources serve your purposes while maintaining the appearance of noble self-sacrifice. Se-jin gestured around the office. This foundation, this charitable work, it's brilliant, really. You get to be the saintly director of his philanthropic empire while he plays artist and feels good about himself. Ha-Rin felt anger flare in her chest, but she kept her voice level. You think I'm manipulating him? I think you're doing what any intelligent woman in your position would do, securing your future while appealing to his savior complex. Se-jin leaned forward slightly. The question is, what happens when the novelty wears off? When he realizes that playing house with a reformed orphan isn't as fulfilling as running a real empire? Is that what you think this is? Playing house? I think Taeyang is a man who's always been attracted to impossible challenges, building companies, making deals others said couldn't be done, conquering markets that seemed impenetrable. Sejin's smile was coldly knowing. You were his latest impossible challenge, the pure-hearted orphan who couldn't be bought. But what happens after he's conquered you? What happens when you stop being impossible and start being ordinary? The words hit deeper than Ha-Rin expected, echoing fears she'd tried to suppress. The difference in their backgrounds, their education levels, their life experiences, were these gaps too wide to bridge permanently? Why are you telling me this? Ha-Rin asked. Because I know Taeyang better than anyone. I've watched him cycle through obsessions before, new business ventures, innovative technologies, even women who briefly caught his interest. The pattern is always the same: intense focus, complete dedication, then gradual loss of interest as the challenge disappears. Sejin stood, smoothing her skirt with practiced elegance. I'm not saying he doesn't care about you now. I'm saying that caring and lasting commitment are very different things, especially for men like Taeyang who equate love with conquest. Before Ha-Rin could respond, Taeyang's voice came from the doorway. Sejin. What an unpleasant surprise. He entered the office with paint still on his hands from the art session, his hair slightly disheveled, his expression shifting from confusion to protective anger as he read the tension in the room. I was just having a conversation with Ha-Rin about the sustainability of philanthropic passion projects, Sejin said smoothly. Such important work you're doing here. Get out. Taeyang's voice was quietly dangerous. Now. Taeyang, there's no need to be rude, I was simply… You were poisoning the well just like you always do, spreading doubt and suspicion because you can't stand to see other people happy. Taeyang moved to stand beside Ha-Rin, his presence both protective and grounding. I said get out. Sejin gathered her purse with deliberate calm. I'll go. But Taeyang, when this little experiment in social responsibility loses its shine, when you remember what it feels like to build something that actually matters in the real world, call me. I'll be waiting. After she left, the office felt contaminated by her presence, as if her calculated cynicism had left invisible stains on everything. Ha-Rin sank into her chair, Sejin's words echoing in her mind like poison. Don't, Taeyang said immediately. Don't let her get inside your head. She made some valid points. She made the same manipulative arguments she's been making for 15 years. The only difference is now she's targeting you instead of me. Taeyang knelt beside Ha-Rin's chair, taking her hands in his paint-stained ones. Ha-Rin, look at me. When she met his eyes, she saw not the boredom or restlessness Sejin had predicted, but depth of feeling that took her breath away. Do you know what I was doing when she arrived? I was teaching Minjun how to draw shadows, how to use darkness to make light more meaningful. And I was thinking about you, about how you taught me the same thing. His voice was soft but certain. You didn't conquer me, Ha-Rin. You saved me. And that's not a challenge that ends. It's a gift that keeps giving. But what if she's right? What if you get tired of this life of me? Then I would be the stupidest man alive. Taeyang cupped her face gently. Ha-Rin, before you, my life was about accumulation. Money, power, possessions. Now it's about multiplication. Taking whatever I have and using it to create more love, more hope, more healing in the world. That's not something you grow tired of. That's something you grow into. Ha-Rin felt the knot of anxiety in her chest begin to loosen. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let her words affect me like that. She's had years of practice at finding people's vulnerabilities, but she doesn't understand that what we have isn't built on conquest or challenge. It's built on choice. Every day I choose you. Every day you choose me. That's not obsession or novelty. That's love. The destiny of Taiyang and Harin has just weathered its greatest test of faith. If you're rooting for their love to triumph over doubt and manipulation, you know that the strongest bonds are forged in the fires of adversity. Christmas Eve in Seoul arrived with a gentle snowfall that transformed the city into a winter wonderland. The Choi Foundation was hosting its first annual holiday celebration, and the main floor had been converted into a festive gathering space. Local families, orphaned children, foundation staff, and volunteers filled the room with laughter and conversation that created a warmth no heating system could match. Harin moved through the crowd like a graceful conductor orchestrating a symphony of joy. She helped elderly volunteers serve traditional Korean holiday foods, mediated disputes between excited children, and somehow managed to make every person feel personally welcomed and valued. Watching her, Taeyang was struck once again by her natural ability to create community wherever she went. "She's remarkable, isn't she?" Dr. Minho appeared beside Taeyang, following his friend's gaze to where Harin was now teaching a group of young children a traditional Korean folk song. "Every day I discover something new to love about her," Taeyang replied. "Today it's watching her help that shy little boy join the singing group. Yesterday it was the way she convinced Mrs. Park that accepting help with her son's tutoring wasn't charity but community support. And what does she discover to love about you?" Taeyang considered the question seriously. "I think she loves that I'm learning to see the world through different eyes. That I'm beginning to understand that true wealth isn't what you accumulate, but what you circulate." Across the room, Bo-ra was regaling a group of teenagers with stories from her first semester of medical school. Her face glowed with health and happiness, and her enthusiasm was infectious. Several of the younger children had gathered around her, clearly viewing her as proof that their own dreams were possible. "She's going to be an incredible doctor," Minho observed. "She's going to change the world," Taeyang agreed. "All of them are. That's what Harin understood before I did, that these aren't charity cases or statistics. They're future leaders, artists, doctors, teachers. We're not just helping them survive. We're investing in the kind of world we want to live in." Chairman Choi Hyun-woo appeared at his son's elbow, carrying 2 cups of hot tea. "The evening is a tremendous success," he said, offering 1 cup to Taeyang. "I don't think I've ever seen so much genuine happiness in one room." "It's what Harin does," Taeyang said simply. "She sees the best in people and creates space for it to flourish." "She reminds me of your mother," Hyun-woo said quietly. "Not in appearance, but in spirit. Your mother had the same gift for making people feel valued, for seeing potential where others saw only problems." It was the first time Taeyang's father had mentioned his late wife in years, and the comparison touched him deeply. "Do you think she would have approved of Harin?" "I think she would have adored her, and I think she would be incredibly proud of the man you've become." Hyun-woo placed a gentle hand on his son's arm. "I know I am." The evening's formal program began with Bo-ra giving a brief speech about her journey from patient to medical student. Her words were eloquent and heartfelt, bringing tears to many eyes as she described how the foundation's support had transformed not just her health but her entire sense of possibility. "A year ago I thought my heart condition defined my limits," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "Today I understand that the only limits are the ones we accept. This foundation doesn't just provide medical care or educational support, it provides hope. And hope, as I've learned, is the most powerful medicine of all." When she finished speaking, the applause was thunderous and sustained. Taeyang watched Harin wipe tears from her eyes, her face radiant with pride and joy. The evening surprise came when the children from the art therapy program presented Taeyang with a collaborative artwork. a large canvas featuring dozens of individual contributions that somehow came together to form a cohesive whole. There were painted flowers next to charcoal sketches, watercolor abstracts adjacent to detailed pencil drawings, all unified by a border of handprints in different colors. "It's beautiful," Tae-yang said, his voice thick with emotion as he studied each unique contribution. "Thank you." "It's called family," explained So-young, the girl who had drawn the small figure before the enormous door in their first session. "Because that's what you and Ha-rin gave us, a family where everyone belongs." As the formal program concluded and the party transitioned into casual mingling, Tae-yang found himself standing beside the large windows that overlooked Seoul's twinkling cityscape. Snow continued to fall gently, creating a scene of perfect winter tranquility. "Penny for your thoughts," Ha-rin said, joining him at the window. "I was thinking about miracles," Tae-yang replied. "A year ago, I thought miracles were about dramatic reversals, terminal diagnoses suddenly cured, impossible obstacles mysteriously removed. Now I think they're more subtle." "How so?" "I think miracles are about transformation, about becoming someone you never thought you could be, about finding meaning in places you never thought to look." He turned to face her fully. "A year ago, I was a dying man who had everything and nothing. Tonight, I'm a living man who understands the difference between having and being." Ha-rin smiled, and in her eyes he saw his own transformation reflected back. How fear had given way to faith, how isolation had blossomed into connection, how despair had been replaced by hope. "I love you," she said simply, the words carrying all the weight of promise and possibility. "I love you too," he replied, and kissed her softly as snow fell outside and joy filled every corner of the room behind them. It was, by any measure, a perfect Christmas Eve. Not because everything was perfect, but because imperfect people had come together to create something beautiful and lasting and true. Spring arrived in Seoul with an explosion of cherry blossoms that transformed the city into a pink and white dreamscape. The new Choi Foundation facility was nearing completion, its modern lines softened by carefully planned gardens that would bloom in rotation throughout the year. Ha-rin stood in what would become the main lobby, reviewing final construction details with the project manager, when Tae-yang appeared with coffee and a suspicious expression of suppressed excitement. "The contractor says we'll be ready for the grand opening in 3 weeks," Ha-rin reported, accepting the coffee gratefully. "The residential wing is ahead of schedule and the medical clinic just needs final equipment installation." "That's wonderful," Tae-yang said, though his attention seemed focused on something beyond the construction updates. "Ha-rin, do you have a few minutes? There's something I want to show you." He led her through the building to the top floor, where large windows offered panoramic views of Seoul stretching to the mountains beyond. But instead of focusing on the vista, Ha-rin found herself staring at an easel positioned near the windows, holding a canvas covered by a pristine white cloth. "Another drawing?" she asked, moving closer to examine his latest work. "Something like that." Tae-yang's voice carried a nervous energy she'd rarely heard from him. It's a visual representation of a question I need to ask you." Ha-rin looked at him sharply, recognizing the significance in his tone. Her heart began to beat faster as Tae-yang moved to stand beside the covered easel. "A year and a half ago, you knocked on my door with a box of discarded medical documents," he began, his hands fidgeting slightly with the cloth covering. "You said you'd come to return something that belonged to me, but you actually brought me something far more valuable. Hope." "Tae-yang." "Let me finish," he said gently. "You taught me that the most important things in life can't be bought or sold. You showed me that real wealth comes from connection, from purpose, from love freely given. You saved my life in every way a person can be saved." With careful movements, he pulled away the cloth to reveal not a drawing, but a mirror mounted in an ornate frame. But it wasn't an ordinary mirror. The glass was etched with delicate designs that caught and reflected light in patterns that seemed to dance and shift. "I don't understand," Harin said, though her voice was barely a whisper. "Look closer," Taeyang said, and as she stepped nearer to the mirror, she could see that the etched designs formed words. "Will you marry me?" Harin's breath caught in her throat as she read the question reflected back at her, surrounded by intricate patterns that looked like flowering vines and soaring birds. But when she turned to face Taeyang, she found him on one knee, holding a ring that caught Seoul's morning light and threw it back in tiny rainbows. "Harin, you taught me to see myself clearly for the first time in my life. This mirror, it's etched with the question I want to ask you every day for the rest of our lives." His voice was steady now, filled with quiet certainty. "Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me, a real life based on love and purpose and the crazy belief that two people from completely different worlds can create something beautiful together?" The ring was perfect. Not ostentatiously large, but clearly precious, with a clarity that seemed to capture and hold light like crystallized hope. But more beautiful than the ring was the expression on Taeyang's face. Vulnerable and hopeful and completely, utterly sincere. "I don't have money or status or family connections to bring to a marriage," Harin said, tears beginning to stream down her cheeks. "You have yourself. That's everything I want, everything I'll ever need. I come with complications, Bora, the other children at the orphanage, a whole community of people who depend on me. I come with complications too. A business empire, public scrutiny, a father who's still learning to prioritize relationship over reputation. We'll figure it out together." Harin looked at the mirror again, at her own reflection surrounded by the etched question, at the image of a woman who looked radiant with joy and possibility. For her entire life, she'd been told she wasn't enough, not wealthy enough, not educated enough, not connected enough to deserve the best things in life. But looking at herself through Taeyang's eyes, she saw someone worthy of love, of partnership, of a future bright with promise. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." Taeyang slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly, then stood and swept her into his arms. They kissed, surrounded by the morning light streaming through the windows, the city of Seoul spread out below them like a benediction. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I love your strength, your compassion, your absolute refusal to believe that anyone is beyond saving. I love the way you see possibility where others see problems, hope where others see obstacles. I love you too," Harin replied, admiring the way the ring looked on her finger, not like an ornament, but like a symbol of partnership, of two lives choosing to intertwine. "I love your generous heart, your artistic soul, your courage to become someone completely different when you realized who you wanted to be." Outside, cherry blossoms drifted past the windows like nature's confetti, celebrating their engagement with pink petals that caught the spring breeze and danced in the air. Below them, the foundation building neared completion, ready to serve as both their life's work and their wedding gift to the world. A place where love would be transformed into practical action, where hope would be given form and substance. "When?" Taeyang asked, reluctant to release her from his embrace. "Soon," Harin said, then laughed at her own eagerness. "I want to marry you before I lose my nerve, before I remember all the reasons why this should be impossible." "It's not impossible," Taeyang assured her. "It's inevitable. It was always inevitable. From the moment you knocked on my door with your box of papers and your stubborn faith in human goodness. As they stood together in their almost completed building, surrounded by the evidence of what love could accomplish when given practical expression, neither could have imagined a more perfect beginning to their forever. The wedding took place on a perfect May morning in the gardens of the new Choi Foundation facility. Harin had initially suggested a small ceremony, but the guest list kept growing as they realized how many lives had been touched by their love story. What began as a simple exchange of vows had evolved into a celebration that filled the foundation's grounds with over 200 people who had become their extended family. The setting was breathtaking in its simplicity and meaning. White chairs arranged in curved rows faced a simple altar made of flowering branches, with the foundation building providing a backdrop that symbolized everything they'd built together. Instead of a traditional bridal party, they were surrounded by the children from their programs, Bo-ra as Harin's maid of honor, and Min-jun from the art therapy group as Tae-yang's best man. Harin walked down the aisle wearing a dress that was both elegant and understated, ivory silk with delicate lace details, simple enough to let her natural beauty shine while sophisticated enough for the magnitude of the moment. She carried a bouquet of wildflowers mixed with cherry blossoms, and her face glowed with a happiness so radiant that several guests openly wept at the sight of her. But it was Tae-yang's expression as he watched her approach that brought tears to even more eyes. His face held wonder, gratitude, and a love so profound it seemed to transform the very air around him. He wore a classic black suit, but the traditional formality was softened by the wildflower boutonniere that matched Harin's bouquet. Chairman Choi Hyun-woo walked Harin down the aisle, an honor that had moved both bride and father-in-law to tears during their planning conversation. "She's the daughter I never had," he had told Tae-yang, "and the daughter-in-law I always hoped for." Dr. Min-ho officiated the ceremony, having become ordained specifically for this purpose. His opening words captured the unique nature of their love story. "We gather today not just to witness a wedding, but to celebrate a transformation." Tae-yang and Harin found each other at moments when both believed their stories were ending, he facing mortality, she drowning in the struggle for survival. Instead, they discovered that their individual stories were actually chapters in a larger narrative about the redemptive power of love. The vows they exchanged were personal, heartfelt, and free of pretense. "Harin," Tae-yang said, his voice carrying clearly across the gathered crowd, "you taught me that wealth isn't what you accumulate, but what you circulate. You showed me that the most valuable things, hope, compassion, love, multiply when shared rather than diminish. I promise to love you not just in abundance but in scarcity, not just in health, but in sickness. Not just when you're strong, but especially when you need strength. I promise to build with you a life that matters, a love that heals, a legacy that lifts others up." "Tae-yang," Harin replied, her own voice strong despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. "You saved my life by showing me that I was worth saving. You taught me that asking for help isn't weakness but wisdom. You proved that some people are exactly who they appear to be, generous, kind, capable of growth and change. I promise to love you not despite your wealth, but because of what you do with it. I promise to challenge you to keep becoming the man you're meant to be, to support your dreams even when they scare me, to build with you something beautiful and lasting and true." When Min-ho pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was gentle, reverent, full of promise for all the years ahead. The celebration that followed was a perfect blend of elegance and warmth. Korean traditional food served alongside international dishes that reflected the foundation's global reach, children's laughter mixing with adult conversation, formal toasts interspersed with spontaneous moments of joy. Bo-ra's maid of honor speech brought both laughter and tears. "A year ago, I was dying, and Harin was working herself to death trying to save me. We were both focused on survival, on just making it through another day. Then Taeyang appeared in our lives like some kind of fairy godfather with a checkbook, and everything changed. But not because of the money, because of the love. Harin taught Taeyang how to live. Taeyang taught Harin how to dream. Together they taught all of us that miracles aren't always dramatic interventions. Sometimes they're just two people choosing to love each other and letting that love overflow into the world. The evening concluded with dancing under strings of lights as Seoul's skyline twinkled in the distance. Harin and Taeyang's first dance was to a Korean ballad about finding home in another person's heart, and as they swayed together, surrounded by their chosen family, both felt the deep satisfaction of a life finally lived with intention and meaning. "Are you happy?" Taeyang whispered against Harin's ear as they danced. "I'm more than happy," she replied. "I'm home." Later, as guests began to depart and the cleanup began, Taeyang and Harin stole a few moments alone in the foundation's main lobby. Through the large windows, they could see Seoul stretching toward the horizon, a city of millions where their love story had begun with a knock on a door and a box of discarded papers. "Any regrets?" Harin asked, settling into her husband's arms. "Only one," Taeyang said, and Harin's expression grew concerned. "I regret that it took me 32 years to find you." Harin laughed, the sound echoing through the empty lobby like music. "I regret that I wasted so much time believing I wasn't worth finding." "We found each other exactly when we were supposed to," Taeyang assured her, "when we were ready to recognize what we'd found." 5 years later, the Choi Foundation had grown beyond even Harin's most ambitious dreams. The original facility had been joined by 3 satellite locations across Seoul, and their programs had become models replicated in cities throughout Korea and beyond. But success, they had learned, wasn't measured in statistics or expansion. It was measured in transformed lives. Taeyang stood in his art therapy studio, now a permanent part of the foundation's offerings, watching a new group of teenagers experiment with watercolors. His hair showed threads of silver now, and laugh lines had deepened around his eyes, but his enthusiasm for the work had only grown stronger with time. "Teacher Taeyang," called out Ji-hoon, a 14-year-old whose parents had died in a car accident 6 months earlier. "I think I messed up my painting." Taeyang moved to examine the boy's work, a landscape that started with dark, turbulent strokes but gradually lightened toward the top of the canvas, ending in delicate touches of gold and pink. "What do you see when you look at it?" Taeyang asked. "A storm ending, maybe, or night turning into day." Ji-hoon studied his own creation with new interest. "Actually, it's kind of beautiful. It's very beautiful. And it tells a true story, that difficult things can transform into beautiful things if we're patient with the process." Across the city, in the pediatric cardiology wing of Seoul National University Hospital, Dr. An Bo-ra was just finishing her rounds when her pager buzzed with an urgent message. A 4-year-old girl had been brought in with the same congenital heart defect Bo-ra had lived with for most of her life. An hour later, Bo-ra sat with the child's terrified parents explaining the surgical procedure that would repair their daughter's heart. Her own experience gave weight to her words, and her confidence provided comfort that medical expertise alone couldn't offer. "Will she be able to live a normal life?" the mother asked through tears. "She'll be able to live whatever life she chooses," Bo-ra assured her. "This condition doesn't define her limits, it just means she'll understand, better than most people, how precious every heartbeat is." That evening, the extended family gathered for dinner at Taeyang and Harin's home, a traditional Korean house they'd renovated in a quiet neighborhood, chosen for its garden space and proximity to the foundation. Chairman Choi Hyun-woo, now fully retired and devoted to his role as grandfather to the 3 children from the orphanage that Taeyang and Harin had formally adopted, helped set the table with the careful precision of someone who had learned to find joy in simple tasks. Ha-rin moved through the kitchen with practiced ease, preparing bulgogi and kimchi jjigae while simultaneously helping 8-year-old Min-seo with her homework and mediating a dispute between 12-year-old twins Jae-min and Jae-won about whose turn it was to feed their rescue dog. "It smells incredible in here," Tae-yang said, entering the kitchen with paint still under his fingernails and an expression of complete contentment. "How were the new students today?" Ha-rin asked, accepting his kiss and automatically checking his hands for paint stains that might transfer to dinner preparations. "Remarkable. Ji-hoon created something beautiful today. He just didn't realize it until he stepped back and looked at the whole picture instead of focusing on the parts he thought were mistakes." "Sounds like someone else I know," Ha-rin said with a meaningful smile. "Are you talking about me or you?" "Both of us. All of us, really. We're all just works in progress, learning to see the beauty in our own stories." Dr. Min-ho arrived as they were sitting down to eat, carrying flowers for Ha-rin and a bottle of wine that cost more than most people's monthly salary. His friendship with Tae-yang had deepened over the years, and his role as honorary uncle to their adopted children brought him profound joy. "How's the tumor?" he asked quietly, as they found a moment alone on the garden patio after dinner. "Still there, still stable. You still think it's miraculous?" Tae-yang asked. "I think love is miraculous. I think purpose is miraculous. I think the way you've learned to live fully in the presence of uncertainty, that's the most miraculous thing of all." Inside, they could hear Ha-rin helping the children with bedtime routines, her voice patient and warm as she answered questions about homework and listened to stories about their day. Through the window, they could see her reading to Min-seo, both of them curled up in the reading chair Tae-yang had custom-made for exactly these moments. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if she hadn't knocked on your door that night?" Min-ho asked. Tae-yang considered the question seriously. "I think I would have died. Not from the tumor, from the emptiness. I would have survived physically for a while longer, but I would have been dead inside. And now? Now I wake up every morning grateful for another day to love my wife, raise our children, and help other people discover their own worth." Tae-yang looked through the window at Ha-rin, who was now tucking Min-seo into bed with the careful tenderness that characterized everything she did. "I used to think my wealth was measured in money. Now I know it's measured in moments like this." Later, when the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Ha-rin and Tae-yang sat together in their garden, watching Seoul's lights twinkle in the distance. The cherry tree they'd planted on their first wedding anniversary was now tall enough to provide shade in summer, and its blossoms filled their spring evenings with delicate beauty. "Do you remember what you said the night we met?" Ha-rin asked, her head resting on Tae-yang's shoulder. "About everyone deserving someone who cares?" "I remember. You said it, actually. We've proven it's true, haven't we? Not just with each other, but with hundreds of people through the foundation, with our children, with everyone whose life we've been privileged to touch." Tae-yang pulled her closer, marveling as he did every day at the miracle of their love. Not the dramatic kind of miracle he'd once hoped for, but the quiet, persistent miracle of two people choosing each other day after day, year after year, building something beautiful and lasting from the raw materials of trust and dedication. "The miracle wasn't that my tumor stabilized," he said quietly. "The miracle was learning that love multiplies when it's shared, that the most valuable things can't be bought or sold, that sometimes the person who saves you is the one who needs saving too. And sometimes," Ha-rin added, "the richest life is built not from what you accumulate, but from what you give away." Above them, stars emerged in Seoul's night sky, each one a distant light piercing the darkness. Much like love itself, they realized, small beacons of hope that somehow managed to illuminate the entire universe. Their story had begun with a dying man who had everything money could buy, but nothing that truly mattered. It continued with a struggling woman who had nothing material but possessed a heart capable of transforming lives. And it flourished into something neither had imagined possible, a love that healed not just two broken people, but everyone fortunate enough to witness its power. Choi Tae-yang's fortune could not save him from death, but Shin Ha-rin's love had taught him how to truly live. And in learning to live fully, to love completely, to give generously, they had discovered the greatest miracle of all, that the human heart, when opened to its full capacity, contains riches beyond any earthly measure. In a world where money too often talks loudest, they had learned to listen to love's quieter voice. And in that listening, they had found not just each other, but their truest selves, two souls who had been lost in different kinds of darkness until they became each other's light, each other's home, each other's miracle that no amount of fortune could ever buy. If this love story has touched your heart, if you felt the transformative power of love that asks for nothing but gives everything, then you understand why Tae-yang and Ha-rin's journey resonates across cultures and continents. The best way to support more stories like this is to subscribe and share with others who believe in the miracle of love. Click to join our community of dreamers who know that the greatest wealth isn't found in bank accounts, but in hearts brave enough to love without reservation.